On behalf of SRTR, I will be presenting the proposed new kidney allocation policy, moving to concentric circles as the first unit of allocation. I have no disclosures. The Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network, or OPTN, passed a new national policy. This deceased donor kidney allocation policy removed donor service area, or DSA, and OPTN regions as geographic units of allocation. The change was made to better comply with the OPTN final rule. The new policy also prioritizes prior living donors and pediatric candidates. Changes to the allocation system are not intended to be final solutions, but rather intermediary steps to a borderless distribution system. The SRTR was asked to conduct simulations of several potential policy scenarios, which I will go over. Candidate priority was changed by sequence in the new kidney allocation policy. Prior living donors were moved right below 100% CPRA candidates with KDPI of less than 0.85 or 85%. Pediatrics has been moved up also, and this is for all donors with a KDPI of less than 35%. In order to do these simulations, we use the simulated allocation models. SAMs are a family of computer simulated programs developed by SRTR. The family of these SAMs includes the kidney pancreas simulation allocation model, whose results I will be showing you today. The SAMs takes real candidates and donor information to simulate allocation by applying new rules that the OPTN committee would like to explore. The software then outputs information on model results of the new allocation rules, including the number of candidates who underwent transplant, those that died waiting, or those that died post-transplant. The SAMs include some random components reflecting uncertainty in acceptance decisions when an organ is offered to a potential recipient, unpredictable life expectancy that can result from undergoing or not undergoing transplant. To account for random variation, SRTR runs the model several times with the same set of allocation rules, organs, and candidates to determine the average outcomes, and that's the kind of results I'll be showing you. Here is a conceptual flow model of the data in the KP-SAM. So the KP-SAM software takes into account real candidates and donors from a single year and simulates allocation by applying new rules that the committee would like to explore. The software then outputs information on the number of candidates that are transplanted, those that died waiting, and also it looks at post-transplant survival. The KP-SAM uses models to estimate things like organ acceptance and post-transplant survival using donor and candidate characteristics. The KP-SAM input files were updated to include transplant candidates listed on kidney pancreas, or pancreas transplant waiting list. Donors whose kidneys or pancreata were recovered for transplant between January 1st, 2017 and December 31st, 2017 were included. The results include all 10 iterations of each model. Here is an example of how proximity points were included in the scenarios that we were asked to model. The points were awarded in a linear fashion, so candidates listed at the donor hospital at the center of a fixed distance circle would receive a maximum of 1 point as per the scenario that's shown in the figure here. All other candidates would receive fewer points up to 500 nautical miles. Candidates at 500.1 nautical miles away from the donor hospital were awarded a maximum of 2 points, and those points would decrease linearly, and no points were awarded after 250 nautical miles. We were also asked to model scenarios that included a step or a plateau of points inside the fixed distance circle. In this example, 4 points were awarded for all candidates within 150 miles of the donor hospital. All candidates outside the 150 nautical mile circle, but within the inner circle, were awarded less than 4 proximity points in a linear fashion. So here are the different scenarios that we were asked to model. The first one that we modeled was the baseline scenario, which is using the current allocation policy, except that pediatrics were given priority for donors with KDPI of less than 35%. And these were the other scenarios, which are listed by the kidney circle size, followed by the pancreas circle size, followed by the inner circle maximum points, and then the outer circle maximum points. These last two scenarios had the plateau point for 150 miles and a plateau point of 250 nautical miles. So here are the results showing the distribution of organ travel distance according to different scenarios. These violin plots show the distribution of organ distance travel for kidney transplants. Approximately 80% of the transplant occurred within the concentric circle around the donor hospital. So, for example, the 150 nautical mile circles, most of the transplants, about 80% of the transplants, occurred within 500 nautical miles. So for the 250 nautical mile circles, most or 80% of the transplant occurred within the 250 miles. Likewise for the 150 nautical mile circles. So the results for the travel distance was that the distance traveled is greatest in larger circles, example the 500 nautical mile circles, and minimized in small circles, example the 150 nautical mile circles. Proximity points within the circle tend to reduce the distance travel. For example, in the median distance in scenario 500, 500, 0 point and 8 points for a kidney transplant was 300 nautical miles. But in the scenario 500, 500, 4 and 8 points, which employed a maximum of 4 proximity points, the median distance for a kidney transplant was 199 nautical miles. The effect of proximity points outside the circle was less strong, likely because relatively few transplants were predicted there. About 10 to 20% of transplants were predicted there. So the size of the concentric circle was the most important determinant of travel distance. So here are the results of some of the subgroups. Kidney transplant rates remained nearly constant across the different scenarios. Kidney transplant rates increased among pediatric candidates, female candidates, African American, Latino candidates. Also, they increased among highly sensitized candidates, candidates with CPRA 80% to 99% CPRA, and candidates with greater than 5 years of dialysis time. Kidney transplant rates decreased slightly among non-metropolitan candidates and those with DPTS less than 20. SAMS has limitations, and this has implications for policy development. The SAMs rely on aggregate historical data. They do not predict changes in organ acceptance behavior or identify trends over time. The SAMs works best for modeling small changes applied to large patient groups, so it's unlikely to give reliable predictions for small population subgroups. So it's not designed to predict outcome below an OPO level, for example. The SAMs assume standardized behavior across the country. Center and OPO level variation in policy or practice is not modeled, and directed or expedited allocations are also not modeled. The SAMS also has other limitations. Organs are discarded after a fixed number, 200 declined offers, regardless of the organ and donor characteristics. SAMs are not designed to predict an overall number of transplants. That's why I didn't show you that data. Overall, SAMs are good tools to estimate relative magnitude and direction of possible effects of policy change. However, some policy changes may be justified even in the absence of clear simulation results. We have published these limitations previously. In conclusion, distance travel is greatest in larger circles and minimized in smaller circles. Proximity points effectively limit travel distance. Simulations show improved access to transplant for several vulnerable populations. These include pediatric candidates, female candidates, African American and Latino candidates, highly sensitized candidates, and candidates with greater than 5 years of dialysis time. Based on these results, the OPTN committee and the board approved the 250, 252, and 4-point policy. This policy has a single circle with a radius of 250 nautical miles around the donor hospital, a maximum of 2 proximity points within the circle, and maximum of 4 priority points outside the circle. The new policy, again, is an intermediary step towards borderless sharing to comply with the final rule. Here are the folks from SRTR and OPTN UNOS that made this work possible. Thank you for your time.